Hey, on today's episode of the Delighted Customers podcast, we talk about a pretty serious topic. The stakes just got higher because in the instance of delivering news that could either mean life or death to the person getting the news, the stakes are really high. Have you ever struggled to deliver difficult news yourself, whether in healthcare, business, or life, in a way that leaves others feeling supported rather than stunned? It's easy to feel unsure or even powerless when these conversations come up. And let's face it, a misstep can have lasting effects on trust and relationships. I know I've wrestled with this myself, and in today's episode, Dr. Rachel Hitt, trained at Harvard Medical School, a radiologist, a medical director of patient experience at Tufts Medicine, reveals the art and science of compassionate communication, even when the stakes are at their highest. We get to the heart of why most attempts at sharing bad news or difficult news fall short, and discover a deceptively simple method, the ART model, or ART model, that makes people feel heard and cared for in less than a minute. And what surprised me the most was how small, genuine gestures can completely alter someone's experience for the better. You'll walk away not just with insights, but practical ways to build trust and loyalty, starting with your very next conversation. Well, today on the Delighted Customers podcast, I am very excited to have back on the show Dr. Rachel Hitt. Dr. Hitt is the Chief of Breast Imaging at Tufts Medical Center and Medical Director of Patient Experience for the Tufts Medicine Integrated Network. She's been doing this a while. She has over 20 years of experience and enjoys interacting with her patients and helping them along their journey. She is a graduate of Harvard Medical School and trained in radiology and breast imaging at the Massachusetts General Hospital. The best of the best. Dr. Hitt also has her master's in public health forum from the University of Michigan. As someone who currently is employed by Michigan State, I can say boo-hoo, hiss, hiss.
Go blue.
But she says go blue, I say go green. We can have fun with that. And she's also a certified facilitator in healthcare communication, which we're going to dig into and tap into her expertise and knowledge in that area on today's episode. From the Academy of Communication in Healthcare, and she's a certified patient experience professional, CPXP. She's worked both in large academic and private practice settings. Rachel, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks so much for having me. Always enjoy talking with you.
It is my pleasure and honor to have you back on the show, and hopefully to share some insights with people on some things that may seem kind of basic, but they're hard to do. They're hard to do. It's not rocket science like the other stuff you do in your job, but they're hard to do, and they're just not practiced enough in this crazy world we live in. And today, let me kind of give you a headline of what we want to dig into, which is the art of communication, that is delivering difficult news with compassion. And you, good or bad, get to or need to do that almost on a daily basis, don't you?
Yeah, as a breast imager, of course, often I'm changing a person's life forever and the life of their loved ones. And even if it's not what I think would be a cancer diagnosis, people are so stressed out. They all think they have cancer, even though many of them do not. And it's just trying to communicate with them in a way that they can understand what's happening. And then if they do have some bad news coming their way, how to help guide them through the process.
So people in psychology world talk about this concept called compassion fatigue. And this is people who take on the burdens of their patients or clients that they're counseling with. I can't imagine being in a position where I would need to tell people this kind of news on a daily basis. Why some healthcare providers not do it so well? Why do you think? What are some of the reasons behind that? And what is this? What is the magnitude of it? Is this an occasional thing, or is this pretty widespread?
That's an interesting question. I think what buoys me is that I know I'm helping patients. And when I'm the one telling them that this, I don't use the word cancer unless they use the word cancer. But if I think this is a worrisome finding, I tell them, and I don't have to do that very often, certainly not multiple times a day, but I do have to do it. I think we're compassion, and I think most anyone would feel compassion for person if they're on that situation where they have some life or death issue that they're talking with their patient. So I don't think there's the compassion fatigue in that regard. I think everyone will certainly rise. I hope and I assume most people will rise to that occasion. Where I think the compassion fatigue sets in is just the daily interaction with patients that requires so much emotional interaction.
Yeah.
I think, as a physician, you're listening to the patient's chief complaints and chief concerns, and you have to take it all in, synthesize it, negotiate an agenda with them, and figure out a plan in a way that they can understand. And I think maybe just hearing things over and over and over again and not getting a mental break or even be able to have the time to sort of have that personal relationship with the patient where you can have a little time to chit-chat, find out a little about them, that I think it can be exhausting in that regard.
So we got exhaustion. We got exhaustion based on the daily grind as one of the reasons why this may not be happening as often as it should in terms of compassion. Is another part of it training, and another part of it the belief that there's just not enough time in the day?
Yeah, I think you've hit on a lot of things. I definitely think people don't feel like they have enough time in the day. We were asked to do so much more with so much less than, let's say, the kind of medicine my father and my grandfather practiced, where there was time to sit and talk and get to know the patient and then go do the physical exam and figure out all the clinical aspects. So you have shorter stints, you have less control over your schedule, and you have a lot of throughput. You have a lot of what we call RVU responsibilities, which is relative value units. Churn it. See the patients, get it done, make the revenue, which really detracts sometimes from the time you need to do things. I mean, as I mentioned, that we don't bill for holding someone's hand or giving them the bad news, and that takes time and energy, but it's so important and so critical. Or if someone has an autistic pediatric child who's got an earache, there's a lot that doesn't speak English or something of that sort. There's a lot more that goes into the interaction than just an ear infection evaluation. So there's so many more elements that we build on it that we have to take care of that's not billed, so to speak, and not accounted for financially. And then your other part of the question was in terms of schooling, are we teaching this? I think medical schools are doing a really good job of starting this, but I think we can really expand on this. And I love that idea of trying to meet with medical schools and develop these types of programs. I think it's very, very valuable. And they certainly touch on it, but how can we make it more integral part of the whole process? So that's an exciting opportunity.
So I if you're listening and you heard the acronym RVU, you're probably thinking what I'm thinking right now, which is there a tension between sharing compassion for a patient given a certain diagnosis and the RVU element. If you could just level set for the audience, where does the RVU come from? Is it a government thing? Is it a hospital thing? Is it a doctor thing? And how important is it in the physician's perception of their evaluation?
Well, I think it's very important in the physician's perception of their evaluation. Often at this point, some of our salary is it's on risk. It's at risk, and it's based on, in part, not entirely. It depends on the institution as well, on your RVUs, how much you can produce. So that's part of it. That happens. I think the issue of there's always that pressure, as I said, to do more in less time, get more done, see more patients. So it's definitely forefront, and it's becoming more and more forefront. I remember being at staff meetings, and granted, I've been around for more than 20 years. This was never discussed, never. And now, at every leadership meeting or faculty meeting, we hear about RVUs. Sometimes we get monthly updates or what our RVUs are. So people are well aware of their RVUs, and it's a big part of the whole process.
It's so fascinating because you wouldn't know this or any of the reasons that underlie why you may feel like you're not getting enough of the doctor or the nurse or any other practitioner's time, and yet they are dealing with the realities of what's happening at the leadership team meeting while we're talking about RVUs, and they're getting evaluated on it. So there's this natural tension, and I want about the power of 40 seconds. We had Dr. Stephen Treziak on the show a while back. I'll put be a link in the show notes to his show and Rachel's previous episode where we got into that. But to help set up the conversation here about how to deliver the difficult news, which there's a tension around taking the time to do it and do it the right way. There's a perception that it will take really long time. his research showed that that's a misconception, that some of the studies that were done showed that in as little as 40 seconds, you can show the patient, sorry if I said customer, the patient some compassion.
Absolutely. I just also want to talk back about the RVUs a little bit. Leadership's under a lot of pressure as well from their boards, from their payers. I mean, they're getting pressure and it's just going to everybody. So I don't want to fault just the leaders. I think it's everyone. But I think we have to really
Yeah.
rethink about the design of the system. I think that's hard. So that's one thing. Now, in terms of the 40 seconds, I'm thinking that you mentioned that. I meant to answer that in your last question as well. So that was a really neat study that I think was done at Johns Hopkins. And what it was, they had a test case of people who've had cancer, people who haven't had cancer. And I might get the details wrong, but in essence, they told people in the very beginning of the encounter, these are oncologists, they said to the patient, I'm really sorry you're going through this. I am going to be giving you a lot of difficult and medical information. If at any point you don't understand what's going on, please feel free to interrupt me. I'm here with you to work through this with you. So there's a partnership. I want you to understand I'm here, and stop me at any time if you have any questions. That was probably longer than 40 seconds in my efforts to try to get that out.
No,
and then on the back end of the visit, after you go through everything, they say, again, I know this is a lot for you. Again, I'm here to help you. We'll go through this together. If you have any questions or concerns, I'm here. Just of appreciation of what the patient's going through, demonstrating partnership, and on the back end, that reminder. That's all it took. And the people in the study really felt as though they were heard. They felt, they felt really listened to and felt supported. Now, it was interesting, in the study, they didn't say that they changed their understanding any more or less between one group or the other, but they felt supported. And I think that's what we all want. And that's going to also help with patient loyalty, which will help the financial bottom line of institutions anyway.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. So what's the big deal? The big deal is, you've got patients who are loyal, meaning they'll refer, potentially keep coming back, and then they'll refer if somebody asks which hospital, which location should you use. I had a really great experience over here. Right?
Yep, and exactly, their star ratings. We're not like on Yelp, but that's how oftentimes people who don't understand the whole medical world, they think all doctors are created equal, they're all capable, and so they'll look at online star ratings and make a determination whether or not they should go to that person or not. And so that's part of these evaluations, and the surveys feed into that. And it's a very odd thing for us clinicians to understand, but that's sort of the new reality that we're dealing with. And so also, if we lose a patient because they're unhappy, one, it's unfortunate for the patient, right? It's like that causes extra stress for them. But it also, we lose a lot of money in the process of losing patients and trying to attract new patients. If we can keep the patients that we have, that they're loyal, they're going to bring in other people, and the system just builds on itself. When you have a lot of patients who are unhappy, just like, I guess, in your world with customers and business, losing customers and trying to bring back, it's just an added cost, which could be avoided.
Yeah, and people listening probably would have heard that it costs up 7 times more to acquire a new customer than to keep an existing one. So yeah, to your point.
I don't know the numbers in medicine, but I'm sure it's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to talk today about a model that you use, that you have shared at presentations, and I'm guessing that you share it internally as well, which is the ART model for interacting with patients. Can you tell us what it stands for and what it means?
Sure. This is something that I learned when I became a facilitator at the Academy of Communication and Healthcare. It's called ART Loops. It stands for A for ask, R for respond, T for tell. So in essence, what we're trying to do is change from a monologue where the doctor is telling the patient blah, 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 a download of information, to more of a dialogue where I mention something, then I hear back from you so I can understand where you're at, what you've understood, and how I can help further explain things in a way that you would understand. So all it is we also call it chunk and check. And I tell my trainees when I teach this course that you can't eat a pineapple spear all at once. You can't stuff it all in your mouth. You have to chunk it up into little bites and then take bites and swallow. And that's what we're doing with information. And so by breaking down in each chunk, you can think one's the ask, one's the respond, one's the tell. And then you just loop it back around until all your information is given to the patient. So that's called there's teach back and then assess understanding. Lots of words. But the bottom line is break down the information into small chunks. So, for example, if I was just doing your ultrasound and I saw something that I'm worried about and I want to do a biopsy because I'm worried about it, I'll say, what I saw in the mammogram, the ultrasound, actually I see something there that I would like to do a biopsy. In my old life, before I got this training, I thought I was pretty good at this stuff, talking to patients. I would say, there's something there. I'm actually a little bit worried about it. I'm sorry if that's a shock to you. What we're going to do is we're going to schedule the biopsy. I'll let your doctor know, and then we'll schedule that before you leave, and then we'll take the samples. Does that sound like a plan to you? Or do you understand, or something like that? In essence, it's a good idea. It makes sense. I'm giving all the valuable information. But now what I say is, Mrs. Jones, unfortunately, I do see something there that I'm actually a little bit worried about, and I'd like to do a biopsy. And then I stop and I pause. I just gave you a ton of information. Most people, when they hear worry and biopsy, they're done. They've checked out. Even if they're a clinician, even if they're a doctor or a clinician, they've checked out. So I stop and I'll say something like, I'm sorry, I'm sure I just gave you a shock. And then I'll ask something. Have you ever had a breast biopsy before? So that's part of the ask. I say, no, I haven't, and I'm really, really worried about that. That might be the patient's response. And I'll say, yes, I'll respond to what she's saying, and I'll respond with verbal and nonverbal cues. So non-verbally would be the power of the pause, wait. The verbal empathy would be sort of like, I'm sorry, I know I just gave you a shock, but have you ever had this biopsy before? And then I can say, well, I will walk you through the whole process, and then I can go through a little bit about it. And then I can say, is this something that you're able to schedule or interested in scheduling? And she'll say, yes. So that was another ask. Yes, that is. And then I'll say, okay, this is how we do it. Before you leave here today, I'm going to have you meet with our breast nurse navigator who will help schedule that. And then I'll loop right back around and say, is there anyone else that I will let your doctor know? Is there anyone else you want me to talk to? Something of that sort. So I'm breaking it down into little bits so they can understand. And it's amazing things that come up that you're not expecting because I'm not just telling them something. I'm sort of meeting them where they are, and I'll find out what are their biggest concerns, and I can answer that for them. Most times with me, like, am I going to die from this? That's the first thing. Has it spread? And I can address those fears and sort of say, we're just finding out what's going on here. We're going to take this one step at a time. And then I can guide them as we go. And so, because we're just gathering information. So I just tell them exactly, I'm very honest, I'm very truthful. But it's true, I don't know what's going on. Now, if it's something like a very small, what I think would be a very small cancer that we can handle, say, I imagine we'll take care of this. And if it's something, this hopefully will be in your rearview mirror in 6 months' time, and you'll move on. Now, if there's something I think I'm far more concerned about being more life-altering in some ways, let's just take one step at a time and see what we get. I mean, I say that to everybody. But I kind of can massage the information a little bit that we'll take care of them and we'll take things one step at a time.
So the point is that you're not being dishonest
No.
at all. So you're being pretty straightforward. The thing that I really noticed was the pause, and that probably was a result of someone understanding the importance of being empathetic to the amount. It's not, it may not be a lot of words, but it's heavy in terms of what they're hearing.
Yes, they have to filter it and understand it and synthesize it. And most people are in shock, even if it ends up being nothing, and it's not, the biopsy's going to be nothing. I'm just telling them they're going to have a biopsy. It can be scary. And then I should also mention, usually I'm in the ultrasound room when I'm telling someone this, or I feel comfortable putting my hand on their arm and just give them that information. Not everybody's going to feel comfortable with that. Not everyone should feel like they have to do that. It just works for me. And I think I started to do that after I read an article about a woman who was diagnosed with brain tumor. And she said, the thing I remember most is a nurse holding my hand while I got the diagnosis because she was in the hospital. And so that's all I do. But you can also tell, is it right if I touch you? You can ask ahead of time and just make sure it's okay. But you have to work in it so it's not awkward. And then I also never use the word cancer unless they use the word cancer. I just say there's something I'm worried about. If they say, could this be cancer? I'll say, yes, unfortunately, I think this could be cancer, and I'm sorry. But then I usually try to follow it up with some hope, and I'll say something that's sort of like, this is all new to you, but it's not new to us. Yeah. We see this all the time, and we can help you through this journey.
So there's a certain comfort there in hearing that there's a confidence level that you're on their team and you're on their side.
Absolutely. And, it's really scary. I mean, it's very All you have to do is imagine if it was you or a loved one. What would you want to hear? And you want someone to help guide you through this process.
Yeah.
That you can trust.
Well, and this may sound hard to believe, but I'm going to share a story. Rachel and I have a mutual friend who got the news in not this way. He found out that he had cancer while he was on the road in his car from somebody who just rung him up on his car as he's driving down the highway and told him that the result was positive for cancer, and didn't set it up, didn't really introduce themselves, didn't do any of the things on the ART model that Rachel just shared. And of course, anything that they shared with him after about what are the next steps and what are the risks and probabilities and all that, he didn't hear a single thing. He was in shock. And he said it was just, he actually heard Rachel speaking, and he raised his hand and said, this was my story, and he shared it in a group. So I'm guessing that is not an isolated incident, unfortunately. And what's been your experience and feedback around the frequency or the prevalence of that person's situation being uncommon or common?
Well, it all depends on how the practice is set up. So what I was telling you was when I was doing the diagnostic workup, based like a woman comes in with an abnormality that they feel, and I've worked it up. When I actually get, after I've done the biopsy, and I actually get the results, we always want the radiologist to call the patient, the person who did the biopsy to call, because we've established a relationship with that person. Some places don't have, for whatever reason, the time, or I don't know, I can't speak for their interest level, to call. They'll have the nurse call, but they'll warn the patient, like the nurse will call you with the results. So I can't speak to how their practice is going. I know that's what happened with that person, unfortunately. And then by telling patients in the ultrasound room what I think's going to happen, I try to plant a seed of that so they can start processing. Because when I actually do call, if I am doing the biopsy, or if someone calls and says, unfortunately, this is a cancer, it's not what we were hoping for, but it is a cancer, it's not a complete shock to them. And I always ask, is this a good time to talk? If they're driving, I ask them to pull over. And for me, it's hard to wait because I'm the kind of person, like, everything's good news. I want to tell you what to write, but I always want to make sure that they're safe and they're in a safe place. And I'll say, feel free to get anyone else on the speakerphone. I'm happy to talk to anyone. And then I will explain everything, the other terms I was talking about, and next steps that we will take care of them, and that we talk about them in a multidisciplinary conference, and then our office someone from surgery will call them, and we'll move this along. So fortunately, I think by doing that, we don't have people who are as shocked as if this is out of the blue. And I think we have to give the respect and credit to our patients that to give them the opportunity to ask the questions to get the information they want to get. Some people really don't want to know anything, and they don't want to hear about it. You tell them that you want to do a biopsy. They don't ask any questions about it. That's okay. That's for them I'll meet them exactly where they are. I'm not going to push anything on them. I might just drop a little thing, say, well, I'm recommending a biopsy, and if this comes back benign, not cancer, because I assume nobody knows what the word benign means, never assume. And I still might think surgery might be in your future, just to make sure. So I just kind of laid the groundwork that surgery might be in your future. I might be wrong, but just to let them know. And this is what I tried teaching my residents as well, like how to communicate this important information.
What kind of feedback do you get from the residents when you're teaching them?
Great question. They, I think, tend to really enjoy it. I mean, they seem to think, oh, I hadn't thought of that. I had one resident recently. I was recommending she was very young, family history or something of that sort, and I was recommending a biopsy. I don't think it's cancer. I just think it's something benign, not cancer. But I could tell while I was talking to her, she was getting really upset, going to be upset. And she's young. This is all new to her. I get it. I get it. And so I was trying to explain it to her and say, I'm not really that worried about it, but this is just to be sure because of X, Y, and Z. And then then she started to cry and, gave her tissue and all that stuff. And as we were walking out, the resident said, I don't know. Like, I didn't see that coming at all. I didn't see those tears coming at all. And, I didn't read that the same way. And I was trying to figure out why you're softening things a little bit. And so I think this is enlightening for them. And it's just other things and little tricks like making sure you knock on the door and ask permission to enter the room before you go in. You have to give the patient some sense of control. They have no control. They're in a gown. They're scared to death. You have to give them some sense of control. Knock in, knock, and it's also being respectful. May I come in? And use their name, Mrs. Jones, may I come in? And then always introduce yourself. And then the obvious one that people always hear about is trying to sit or be at their level, the patient's level when you're talking with them. So it's all sorts of little tricks. Smiling's your superpower. Medicine in and of itself is a fabulous profession. The human physiology, the treatments, the management, the interaction with patients, it's amazing. It's when you apply all the business stuff, which it has to be, there has to be a business model to it, that it starts getting a little squeegee-jawed. And when you're going through medical school, you're not thinking about that stuff. You're not really taught about that stuff. So I'm trying to, in my own little way, in my own little corner of the world, trying to do that.
Well, and if you're listening and you're not in the medical field, there's still a lot of applications that I can see in this. Granted, the stakes aren't as high because when you are sharing news about a biopsy or a diagnostic image, yeah, you're talking about life and death. The stakes couldn't be any higher. After that, news, especially the potential negative news, the rest of your life could change. Like you said, life altering. In the business world, it may not be the stakes might not be quite as high, but there's always difficult news that comes along in the business world. And how you communicate that news is so important. You shared a whole bunch in this Ask, Respond, Tell, the ART model about things that could be perceived as bad news, huge change, people worried at night, sleepless at night about their jobs and their livelihood. And the way you communicate that information is going to have an impact on their employee loyalty and the way they perform their job, and then their ability to be clear-headed and give back to those people they serve. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. It's all about the communication and just trying to understand where they're coming from and answering as empathetically as you can.
What really incredibly powerful stuff. What did we not talk about that or get to that you wish we would have?
You didn't know. Now you're going to make me think.
Another cup of coffee?
Yeah, you're going to make me think. I would love to figure out a way how we could make this more easily adapted or adopted by institutions. I feel like it's often an uphill battle. And I'm trying to figure out the way to implement it because to me, as we talked about before, it's such common sense. And this is practically free, right? It's taking the time to teach people to understand this is such a basic thing. It's so common sense and it doesn't take time to learn. And also for people who think this is a trait that you're either born with or you're not versus a skill, I completely disagree. Listen, I learned physics. I learned calculus for getting into medical school. Not my strengths, but I learned it. So you can learn these things. And these are fun things to learn, little things to learn, and they're little tweaks. And I want people to feel like they can still be their authentic self. I don't want you to say, "Oh, I'm going to start talking in a way it's not me," because then that doesn't help anybody. Keep saying I'm sorry and plaster a smile on my face. No. We can work with you individually. People like myself who coach. I've got a wonderful team member I work with, Olga Litvak, who's the System Executive Director of Patient Experience, and we do coaching for clinicians one-on-one. We offer group sessions to teach these things. So they're just little tweaks, but it has to be authentic to that person. And your patients will really appreciate it and understand that as well.
Excellent. What a wonderful conversation. I wish more doctors were like you.
Thank you. There are a lot of great doctors out there.
There are a lot of great doctors, this is true, and other medical care providers. But taking yourself outside of the medical world for just a second, what delights you as a customer?
That's not as hard to think about. So what delights me as a customer? I really love it when people respond to your needs and anticipate your needs. For example, if we're going out to dinner or something like that, to have the hostess welcome you. So that in medical world, I also want the front desk to welcome you with a smile, acknowledge you. That's important. And then this is funny, I was going through an airport in Vienna and, dragging our suitcases along and everything like that. And then I looked up and they had free strollers for people and free things. Like they anticipated the needs to have to carry things. And moving things and like wash stations here and this and that. So they're anticipating the patient, or not the patient, the customer's journey and helping them along the way. And it's just the little things. We're not asking for big things. I think all of us can appreciate that. We're not asking for big things, but if someone can anticipate our little needs as we go, you're going to have so much loyalty that way. And so we're just trying to do that. I would love to make that on a grander scale for patient experience, but that's what I think for customers, as a customer myself.
Well, yeah, they're little in terms of the resources, the dollars, the time, the sophistication that's required, but in terms of the impact, they're huge.
Huge.
And
Little investment, huge return on investment.
And I couldn't agree more with my own experience at the bank. Is each year, as we went through the year, there was a list of things that we would change that came out of things like doing journey maps and getting customer feedback, qualitative and quantitative. And those things that we ended up changing, the overwhelming majority of them were simple interventions that didn't cost a tremendous amount of money.
Mm-hmm. It's so true, isn't it?
It is. So this ART model is beautiful, and so grateful that you shared it with the audience. There are implications in any industry. Rachel, thank you so much for being on the show. If our guests or if our listeners wanted to get a hold of you, what would be the best way?
Probably on LinkedIn.
Okay.
That'd be the best.
And your last name is Hitt, right?
Yes, correct. Like I always say, hit a ball with 2 T's.
Dr. Rachel Hitt, thank you so much for coming back on the Delighted Customers podcast.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. Great conversation.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Delighted Customers podcast. It would mean so much if you would take a moment to subscribe. You can go to Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen to podcasts, click on the plus sign or follow button, and that will ensure that you don't miss an episode, and it helps get the word out to others. While you're there, I'd love it if you leave a 5-star review. I look forward to seeing you back here next Thursday.